Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's our pleasure to have you here again in the Czech National Bank. We are pleased to have you here for another quarterly meeting with analysts. This time it's in a little bit different room. This is the actually very unique experience for you to see the room where our policy-making board is making its deliberations on policy. This is the very room here. Together with me today are present two members of our policy board. It's Mr. Pavel Řežábek and Mr. Jiří Rusnok. As always, we will start with the presentation of our new macroeconomic forecast. As almost on every occasion in this meeting, it will be Tomáš Holub, head of our monetary policy and statistics department, who will give the presentation, an overview of the most recent forecast and its assumptions. Following Tomáš's presentations, we will have a usual Q&A with our board members. So that's what we are in for today, and now the floor is yours, Tomáš, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. It's my pleasure to welcome you here in this room and to present to you our new forecast. As usual, I'll start with the forecast assumptions and then I'll describe in detail the new macroeconomic forecast and briefly compare it with the previous one, as we have made some significant changes, especially to the outlook for nominal variables, while the real variables were not affected so significantly. And finally, one of the key issues that we were addressing in the new forecast is the impacts of low oil prices on the macroeconomic outlook, both inflation and the real economy. So there is a special section on this topic at the end of my presentation. So let me start with the assumptions of the forecast. As usual, the forecast is based on the consensus forecasts, in particular on the January consensus and the related market outlooks. And this consensus assumes that after a temporary slowdown during 2014, the growth in the effective euro area is going to re-accelerate towards 2% in the coming 2 years. But the outlook is somewhat lower than the previous forecast assumed. So the re-acceleration is going to take a bit more time. What has shifted down significantly is the outlook both for producer and consumer prices in the euro area. This reflects first the ongoing slack in the European economy, and second, the sharp fall in global energy prices. Here, of course, we have some uncertainty to what extent the downward shift is already sufficiently reflecting the steep fall in oil prices that we observed in December and January this year. And similarly, for the GDP and price outlook, we have some uncertainty to what extent this has reflected already the anticipation of the further easing measures of the European Central Bank. But those easing measures have been clearly reflected in the outlook for the euro area interest rates, which are almost at zero for the whole forecast horizon, so until the end of 2016. And also the outlook for euro is much weaker against the US dollar than in the previous forecast. And you know that this reflects already observed developments. As regards fiscal policy, we still keep broadly the same view as in the previous forecast. We view fiscal policy last year as mildly expansionary. Our estimate suggests that the overall deficit remained broadly stable at around 1.2% of GDP. There was some revival of public investment and current spending. On the other hand, the growing economic activity had a positive outlook, positive impact on fiscal numbers, and there were also extraordinary revenues from the sales of frequency bands in telecommunications. For this year, for 2015, we expect that fiscal policy will provide some further boost to economic growth. We estimate this year's fiscal impulse at 0.5 percentage point of GDP, and it reflects a combination of discretionary fiscal measures such as abolition of healthcare fees, a new 10% value-added tax rate, growing pensions on top of standard indexation, increase in public wages, which is relatively significant, and also the fact that public investment finance from EU funds will culminate this year, because this is the last year that we can use the money from the previous budgeting and programming period. For that reason, we expect some negative fiscal impulse in 2016 amounting to 0.3% of GDP, because after the peak in EU financing, EU projects, there will be some temporary slowdown in 2016 in this area. Finally, the forecast is significantly affected by the monetary policy assumptions, and here we assume that the exchange rate will be used as a monetary policy instrument until the end of over the entire forecast horizon, which means until the end of 2016. And together with this, interest rates will be flat at their current very low levels, reflecting the repo rate being set at technical zero and a small money market premium. Now I'm already coming to the new forecast itself. We expect that both headline and monetary policy relevant inflation will be at zero or slightly negative during this year. But in 2016, they will rise to the 2% inflation target as the year-on-year fall in oil prices fades away from year-on-year inflation figures, and according to the external assumptions of the forecast, the deflationary tendencies in the euro area will also dissipate, while the domestic economy will continue growing, the domestic wages will continue growing, and as a result, the domestic economy will have some upward effect on the growth of the price level. As regards the fundamental story behind the inflation outlook, we expect that the overall pressures on prices will almost disappear in the near term because of imported disinflation. While the domestic economy is having moderate but already slightly pro-inflationary impact on prices because of growing wages and growing economic activity. As regards the real side of the forecast, we see some significant tailwinds which will boost economic growth this year. It will be accelerating external demand, low oil prices, which will increase purchasing power of households and profitability of corporate sector. Still easy monetary conditions, both thanks to the weakened exchange rate and historically low interest rate levels. And in 2015 also the expansionary fiscal policy, as I've already mentioned. As a result, we expect the growth to reach 2.6% this year, and because of further acceleration of foreign demand to go up to 3% next year, despite the temporary decrease in public investment. And we expect that this continued economic growth will have some further positive effect on the labor market. This is already the picture showing our headline inflation forecast. You can see that in the first half of the year we expect broadly zero inflation levels, and then through in the negative territory in 2013, in the third quarter of 2015. This reflects the assumption that natural gas prices will, with some time lag, follow the oil price developments, and that with some further time lag, this will spill into regulated prices for households. This is, of course, another source of uncertainty, but traditionally, natural gas prices have been linked with oil prices quite significantly, and the link was quite tight, so we decided to incorporate it in the baseline scenario of our forecast. But then, of course, the primary effects of the low oil prices will start fading away, and as I said, in 2016 we expect the inflation to go back to the 2% target due to the unwinding of the imported deflationary pressures and ongoing growth in the domestic economy and in domestic wages. Looking more deeply at the structure of current inflation, it has declined almost to zero. The December figure was just 0.1. As regards the structure, the administered prices continued falling in year-on-year terms. But what was new is that fuel and food prices also started to decrease. On the other hand, our measure of core inflation increased slightly, and this is true for both subcomponents of core inflation. So it's true both for tradable goods and for non-tradable goods. And we see this as a reflection of the weakened koruna and the growth in domestic economy and domestic wages in the private sector. Here you can see that the structure of inflation is fundamentally different from what we observed in late 2013 when the Czech National Bank decided to start using the exchange rate as an unconventional monetary policy instrument. So the sources of deflationary pressures differ quite significantly from that period. This is our monetary policy inflation forecast. It is a bit lower than headline inflation forecast in 2015 because there is an overall slightly positive impact from indirect exchanges, mainly because of increasing in excise duties on tobacco. On the other hand, the second 10% VAT reduced rate has a small negative impact on CPI. So because of this, monetary policy relevant inflation will be negative in 2015, but then in 2016 it will coincide with headline inflation because we expect no further indirect exchanges for 2016, and therefore at at the very end of the monetary policy horizon, it will go back to the 2% inflation target. Looking even deeper into the structure of price developments on our forecast, we expect that the market determined prices, which are summarized under net inflation, will decline in year-on-year terms temporarily at the beginning of this year, and this will reflect a sharp fall in the fuel prices and a temporary year-on-year decline in food prices. But then net inflation will start increasing again, and it will be close to 2% at the end of the forecast horizon. As regards administered prices, the year-on-year decline will moderate significantly at the beginning of this year. This is mainly because of the electricity price increase this year being much less pronounced than at the beginning of 2014. But then it will become more significant again during 2015. And this reflects what I've already mentioned. We assume in the forecast that natural gas prices will follow the oil prices and will become cheaper even for Czech households. Then in 2016, as the fall in oil prices will fade away from year-on-year figures, we'll go back to positive growth rates of administered prices. Core inflation, which is the left-hand side chart, will slow down temporarily around mid-2015 because the primary effect of weakened koruna will fade away from the year-on-year figures. But then it will resume its growth, and at the end of the forecast horizon it will be at around 1.5%, supported by the ongoing growth of wages in the Czech economy and also by the resumed price growth in the euro area, less deflationary pressures imported from that side. As regards food prices, I mentioned we expect a temporary year-on-year decline at the beginning of this year, but then with the new harvest, resumed moderate growth of food prices. This is the analytical decomposition of fundamental inflationary factors coming from our core forecasting model G3. At the moment, the assessment is such that inflationary pressures overall have de facto faded away. But this is due to two offsetting factors. Import prices have become quite strongly anti-inflationary because of the sharp drop in oil prices and because of the ongoing weak price developments in the euro area, while the domestic economy is already having some positive impact on the price level, which has lasted for 3 or 4 quarters, but now it should become a bit more visible, a bit more significant, reflecting the ongoing increase in nominal wages and improving economic and investment activity. Looking into the future, import prices should remain anti-inflationary this year, but then this anti-inflationary effect should fade away in 2016, which will imply an overall speed up of the pressure on prices, while the domestic economy we expect quite smooth developments and continued upward pressures on the cost of firms and therefore also on the overall consumer price level. This is the real part of our forecast. after some slowdown, a temporary slowdown in late 2014 and early 2015, we expect the growth rate to re-accelerate towards 3%. So on average, our forecast for 2015 is 2.6%, and it's at 3% for 2016. And I've already mentioned that the economy will be supported by a combination of favorable factors such as accelerating external demand, easy monetary conditions, low oil prices, and fiscal expansion in 2015. At the same time, the growth will be quite balanced and broad-based. We expect positive growth and positive contributions to GDP growth basically from all components of aggregate demand, with some exception of net exports, which for this year will overall have a broadly neutral contribution. We expect that household consumption growth will continue increasing, and in 2016 it will slightly exceed 2%. We also expect continued growth of investment, driven partly by government investment in 2015, but also by growing investment in the private sector. There are some ups and downs in the forecast, which is to explain, it's an accounting impact of the supersonic fighters, which has no fundamental impact on the GDP growth, but as some methodology, it should have a temporary upward effect on investment, but it will be matched by higher imports recorded in national accounts. As regards export growth, it was weaker in the second half of 2014 than in the first half of last year, but with the assumed and expected re-acceleration of euro area demand, we expect both export and import growth rates to increase again towards 10% during 2015. The ongoing economic growth is having a positive impact in the labor market. The employment growth expressed in full-time job equivalents was positive in 2014, and we expect this trend to continue quite smoothly also in 2015 and 2016. But we changed slightly our view on the composition. In the previous forecast, we assumed that initially this will be driven mainly by lengthening of the average job and to a lesser extent by growing number of employees, but the recent data suggests that it's actually the number of employees which is growing, and we now expect this trend to continue also in 2015 and the next year. The headline figures on nominal wage growth are still quite volatile due to the base effects of tax optimization in 2012 and 2013. So here the main picture, it's the blue line, which shows our analytical adjustment of the nominal wage growth. And here you can see that the nominal wage growth in private sector has remained still quite slow. It's positive, it has turned around compared to the previous recession, but it's still below 2% in year-on-year terms. But going forward, together with the ongoing economic growth and the expected return of inflation back to the target in 2016, we expect the nominal wage growth to accelerate towards 4% at the end of 2016. Together with growing employment, we also expect ongoing decline in the general as well as registered unemployment rate. So overall, the labor market picture is really quite positive. And finally, I've already mentioned that the forecast assumes market interest rates at their current very low levels for the whole forecast horizon, assuming that two-week repo will be left at technical zero, and also the money market premium will remain at the current level. When comparing the current forecast with the previous one, the outlook for inflation, but also other nominal variables, has been lowered quite significantly, mainly owing to the lower oil prices, which have affected in the downward direction both the administered price outlook and net inflation forecast. Together with this, we have also cut the nominal wage growth prediction in the private sector, which partly reflects the weaker observed data of nominal wages in 2014, and also the considerably reduced outlook for consumer price inflation. As regards the GDP growth outlook, here the change is positive. It goes up, and this is in spite of the fact that the growth in 2014 was a bit weaker than expected, and that the outlook for external demand has shifted down. But this was more than offset by the positive supply side effect of lower oil prices in the forecast. And as regards monetary conditions, we expect them to remain easy for longer than in the previous period, because we extended the assumed duration of the exchange rate as an instrument of monetary policy, and the period of interest rates being kept at the zero lower bound. This is a graphical illustration, really much lower inflation, especially in 2015, which is directly affected by the first round effects of lower oil prices. Then as these primary effects fades away and the secondary effects are expected to be relatively limited, the difference compared to the previous forecast becomes less and less, and it's quite marginal at the end of 2016. Both the two major components of inflation forecasts are lower. Net inflation is lower, mainly because of the sharp fall in fuel prices, but also lower outlook for core inflation. Administered prices are lower, mainly in 2015 and 2016, reflecting the lower outlook for natural, mainly for the natural gas prices for households. Looking into net inflation in more detail, we have a lower forecast for core inflation, and here the two key factors is more anti-inflationary pressures from the external environment, so the deflationary tendencies in the euro area, and also the more subdued domestic wage growth observed in 2014. And of course, on top of that, there is some impact via lower inflation expectations from the oil prices and overall more subdued price growth. While for food prices, our forecast remains quite similar to the previous one. In terms of the GDP growth, the slowdown during 2014 and early 2015 was somewhat more pronounced than expected in the previous forecast. But then going forward, we are actually slightly more optimistic. And this is mainly the reflection of lower oil prices, and for 2016 also more relaxed or easier monetary conditions because of the delayed exit assumed in the forecast. As regards the components of aggregate demand, We have revised our outlook for household consumption and investment slightly down, but this is to a lesser extent that what would be a mechanical reflection of weaker fixed investment in the second half of 2014 and weaker nominal wage growth in 2013, because in the opposite direction, there is the positive impact of lower oil prices on the purchasing power and on profitability. Regarding the export and import growth rates, we take into account the sharper than expected slowdown in the export and import volume in the third quarter of 2014, and also a more pronounced slowdown in foreign demand, but then we are actually a bit more optimistic as regards the re-acceleration of the growth rates. And yeah, that's it. Nominal wage growth, it has shifted down quite significantly, on average by about 1 percentage point. And the reason is twofold. First, the weaker starting level for nominal wage growth, and second, the lower outlook for inflation. And finally, as I mentioned, monetary policy conditions are expected to remain easy for a longer period of time, because we postponed the exit from using the exchange rate, and the exit is now assumed to take place after the forecast horizon. Finally, as I mentioned, we discussed quite a lot what would be the overall effects of the sharp fall in oil prices, and this factor is viewed as a rather significant positive supply-side shock for the Czech economy. That's quite obvious, but of course the board was interested in some quantified version of this statement, some numbers behind the idea of this being classified as a positive supply-side shock. And here we took the advantage of the fact that we have a satellite extended version of our core forecasting model, G3, which deals explicitly with oil prices. So unlike the main forecasting model, which approximates foreign price developments only by foreign producer prices in the effective euro area, in this extended version it's split between oil prices and the remaining producer prices in the effective euro area. And we did this because we think that this extended version of the model is more appropriate to assess the impact of the lower oil prices in a more appropriate way than the core forecasting model, and in a more explicit way. And what we did is that we compared the forecast using this model for the current levels of oil prices and the current market outlook with a hypothetical scenario in which the oil price would immediately return to $100 per barrel. And what you see in the table, it's the difference between the two scenarios. And it really shows that the impact on inflation is quite significant. In its peak in late 2015, it's exceeding 1 percentage point. Here it's actually not just the model, but also the impact on natural gas prices for households, which would not decline in the scenario with $100 per barrel of oil. On the other hand, the impact on the real GDP goes in the opposite direction, and in its peak it has a similar magnitude, slightly exceeding 1 percentage point. and it provides a positive boost both for real consumption and investment. For real consumption, it's via the higher real disposable incomes. For investment, it's via higher profitability, better performance of the companies. The fact that it's a positive supply side shock holds even at the zero lower bound, when nominal interest rates cannot be cut to partly offset the anti-inflationary impact, but of course it's conditional on that on the assumption that inflation expectations remain well anchored to the 2% inflation target. This is just a visual representation of the table. For those of you who prefer graphs rather than tables, one additional variable which is here and which I would like to mention explicitly is the nominal wage growth, which according to this extended version of the model should actually be higher with the lower oil price than otherwise. And here this is a source of uncertainty that we have. The logic behind this is that if we view the oil price as a positive cost push factor, a positive supply side shock, it will increase the profitability of companies because they will pay less for their inputs. And this bigger cake will be divided somehow between increased dividends for the owners of the companies, increased investment, and higher wages. Of course, this is quite uncertain because at the same time, the lower oil price means lower expected inflation, so the demands from labor unions may actually become weaker, lower than otherwise. So here we are not really not certain how the nominal wage growth will respond to this kind of positive supply side shock, and it may have different implications for monetary policy because the nominal wage growth, it's the main determinant of the inflationary pressures from the domestic economy. Finally, we tried to do some further decomposition of the impact on inflation into the individual subcomponents. Here it's actually a satellite model, so please don't take this as too precise. It's a rough estimate, but quite obviously the drop in oil prices has a significant downward effect on fuel price inflation, and to a lesser extent also on food price inflation, because energy is an important input into agricultural production. While for core inflation it may actually have some upward impact because of the positive effect on real disposable incomes and a kind of substitution effects, being able to use the increased purchasing power to buy more goods that fall under the core inflation aggregate. So that's it. Thank you for your attention, and I pass the floor back to Marek Petruš.
Thank you, Tomáš, for your presentation. Let me now open the Q&A. But before we proceed and start collecting your questions and answering them, let me ask you to use the microphones that you have all in front of you. And please, when asking questions, do present yourself and state your name and the institution that you represent. Thank you for your cooperation. So now the floor is yours. Please take your questions.
Martin Paul, General Investments. I will start with some technical questions to do oil prices simulations. Starting with the assumptions. What are the assumptions behind these simulations? Are they exactly the same like in the base scenario? I mean about dollar exchange rate and about domestic monetary policy setting? And I still don't understand the huge difference between the forecast of some variables between the base scenario and the simulations. Especially nominal wage growth, there is a huge difference, and also also the inflation development. I think there is quite fast recovery in comparison to the baseline scenario. Why are the differences so big?
Okay, I presume Tomáš will answer the question.
Okay, yeah, the assumptions are exactly the same as in the baseline, which means that the US dollar exchange rate, as regards monetary policy, they are exactly the same. So the forecast assumes that it will, the floor, the exchange rate will be used as an instrument throughout the entire forecast horizon, and interest rates will remain at technical zero. As regards the US dollar against euro, I think it's also assumed to go back where it was before the fall of oil prices. In other words, we expect that actually that corona prices would go back to the pre-fall level. Because US dollar and oil typically move in the opposite direction, so it wouldn't be appropriate to take one move only and not the two together. The difference, I should warn, however, that it's done in a different model. So you shouldn't mechanically add the bars from the charts to the published baseline scenario, because here the additivity doesn't hold. The two models are slightly different. So from that point of view, be a bit careful. As regards the impact on inflation, about 1/2 of it, it's via market-determined prices, so it's via the model mechanisms. The other 1/2 is via the administered natural gas prices. And, well, the impact is initially increasing as the lower oil price passes into both market-determined prices and natural gas prices for households. But then the primary effects fade away, and that's why the difference disappears quite quickly. And at the end of 2016, the scenario with the low oil price outlook is actually above the scenario with oil being at $100, and there are two factors. First, the current market outlook is such that after the fall in oil prices currently, there will be some tendency of these prices to go up towards, I think, 65 US dollars per barrel, which compared to the flat price at 100 means some upward pressure on fuel prices in year-on-year terms. And the second factor is the better economic dynamics in the scenario with lower oil prices because of the favorable supply side effect. Does it answer your question?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for now. Will there be any questions for our board members? There are two of them present here. So if there are any. Dana?
Hello, my name is Dana Hajková. I'm from Česká spořitelna. I have several questions. Sorry. I have several questions. Some of them are for monetary policy. I will start with them. On your forecast, you expect a pickup in inflation in 2016 and quite robust growth of the economy, in 2016, even if the fiscal impulse comes from quite significantly positive to negative. And basically, this is all because of the expected developments in the euro area. We expect increase in prices in euro area based on, or you expect based on the ECB new policies and some pickup in euro area growth as well. Did you do, in last inflation report you presented sensitivity analysis, or you presented analysis how the outlooks for euro area shifted, and they were shifted down in time. Did you this time make any sensitivity analysis to this developments to the euro area, and what was the outcome of that? The second question for monetary policy is you expect some effects of oil prices to go to natural gas prices, and to have drop in regulated prices in the third quarter of 2015. Did you, in monetary policy decision, take this effect into account? Kind of this is regulated prices, it's again price shock. Did you explicitly take this into account? And on the outlook, inflation is in the monetary policy horizon in the lower bound of the inflation target. Does the bank board consider this as fulfilling the inflation target? Because more shocks can come, of course, upwards, but also downwards, and you can be below inflation target finally in the monetary policy horizon, or 1 year from now. And also when the regime of using exchange rate as a monetary policy tool started, you said that you will wait for inflation cushion, or you will try to build an inflation cushion before you exit from this intervention regime. Does it hold, this statement and this attitude of the bank board? And I had a little technical question about the implication of the scenario of the oil prices. You have, in this scenario, Mr. Holubkon described the effect on wages and the positive effect on wages. Is that the effect in the baseline model and in baseline scenario similar, so that the positive oil price shock goes also adds to the wage dynamics? Thank you very much.
If I counted them well, these were like 5 questions. I guess Tomáš will take up the technical questions, and then we will give the floor to our board members to answer the policy questions.
Yeah, this is what happens when we leave our when we allow our senior staff to go to the private sector. We then get many smart questions. Well, I'll start with the euro area outlook. You are right that in the recent forecast it's lower and lower. It has been constantly shifting down. It's also true for this new forecast. The question is whether this will finally be reversed by the further easing measures of the ECB. This is one source of uncertainty that we clearly have, but for the moment we are not able to put any numbers behind those uncertainties to do a kind of sensitivity analysis or alternative scenario. So the answer is no. This time we haven't done any sensitivity analysis related to the euro area outlook. Actually, the only analytical scenario that we did, apart from the baseline, was the oil scenario, which I've presented here. So no other scenarios. Well, another technical question. Yeah, well, fulfillment of the target. It's more a policy question. It actually goes back to the target at the very end of the monetary policy horizon, but on average it's slightly below. But I'll leave this for the board members. Yeah, and the regulated prices are, of course, part of the forecast. To what extent the board applies the kind of escape clause also to these regulated prices, it's another question. As regards the effect of oil prices on wages, here there is a difference between the core model and the extended one. The positive impact on the wage growth is only in the extended version of the model, because in this extended version of the model, the lower oil price has no effect on relative price competitiveness vis-a-vis the main trading partners, and at the same time it has a positive impact on the real economic growth. So it's shifting the nominal wage growth up. So from that point of view, there may be some upward risks to our nominal wage forecast. On the other hand, there is also a strong assumption, a relatively strong assumption in the forecast that inflation expectations will remain well anchored, and if not, this would be manifesting itself by weaker nominal wage growth. So I would say that here we have a two-sided uncertainty, and it was also mentioned in the presentation after the board meeting and also in the statement of the board.
Okay, so now we'll go to policy questions. Mr. Rusnok.
So, thank you very much. Good morning to everybody, also from me. First of all, I would like once again express, the meaning of the whole board, that we find the inflation report as a very, I would say, good piece of work. So I would like to express once again the thanks to Tomáš and his team. And to your questions, it was partially also said. Of course, you're right that we are not on the target in the horizon, firmly in the target. We are definitely only approaching the band of the target in the end of the period. But the board is aware of that very well, and we stated also in our statement that it's a result of the extraordinary environment linked with this positive supply side shock. The oil prices. So I would maybe say something like we take it like an exceptions for fulfilling mechanically the target in this very specific period. But on the other hand, of course, we are very well aware that this is temporary effect, and it will subsequently unwind or expire, and we will definitely be much more focused on the next forecast of inflation, where we will see probably more in detail what will happen when in the end of the year we can expect that this effect will fall or almost dismiss from our inflation forecast. So we are aware of that we are not fully in the target. Inflation cushion, yes, I would state that, at least from my perspective, it's still valid. It's still valid that we will decide to leave the intervention regime only once we will be enough sure that there is enough, I would say, inflation pressure on horizon, and we will risk, or at least there will be minimum risk that we will be forced to go back to the same regime or something like that on the, I would say, foreseeable horizon. So yes, this is still valid. That's my understanding. But this was not, it was not explicitly discussed last board, if I am not wrong. And now please help me, I forgot your next questions. Maybe Pavel could, please, yeah, yes, go ahead.
This was the one on the natural gas prices, but I think you already answered that.
Yeah, Tomáš answered, yeah.
So,
And next.
Okay, Mr. Žežábek wants anything to add? Please take the floor.
Good morning to everybody as well. You raise a very interesting question about the impact of the policy of ECB. Up to my point of view, we are living in strange time because fiscal policy is really tight. We have stronger regulation, and we have only one tool in whole the world, that is monetary policy. And what for Europe ECB did, it's really interesting because if you check the last 2 months, the fall of euro to US dollar was huge, and there is not only about exchange rates, that is about the whole world, because we can expect moving in the international business because some prices are in dollars, some in euro, and I look forward what will happen with China, for example, because they mainly sell the goods in dollars, and it could extremely help to euro, because the fall in last 2 months, about 10%, it's extremely huge. And if you check the Czech Republic, the fall in the last 2 months was about 10% as well, and the fall, if you check the situation before using exchange rate as a monetary policy tool, and if you check it to the time, exchange rate to euro was really stable, but to US dollar the fall was about 23%, and the changes is foreign business could be huge, but the last 2 months was the main important, and what will happen, we are a little bit more optimistic that it could help the Czech economy. The intervention in ECB could help the Europe, and we are extremely joined to Europe, and it could help us as well. And that's the reason why we could be a little bit calm and a little bit wait what will happen. Thanks.
Thank you. So I guess we answered all of the questions. Please, man in the back.
Jaromír Šindel, Citibank. I would like to ask you about wording in, let's say, statement in February compared to December about this deflation condition. In February, you said that you are ready to hike the floor if this condition is met. In December, you said that the bank board is ready to consider it. So my question is whether this is just a simply change of words, or there is currently a majority of bank board members which are ready to hike the floor if the condition is met, while in December there was just a minority of bank board members who were ready to hike the floor if the condition is met.
Okay, I try. My perception is that there is no change in this. Maybe I do not know the wording exactly of the statements, but from the discussion I've been taking part, I do not have the feeling that there would be significant or at any change in the approach of different members of the board. So, but definitely in this statement we elaborate much more the change of the environment comparing with the last one, previous one. Yeah, because the environment is completely different. It was explained, it seems to me, enough already. So, but regard the readiness to act if we will meet the specifically defined situation. So not only the deflation, the short-term one, but also the slump in the demand and so on and so on. It was, in my perception, the same.
Up to my point of view, all week we are facing with new information, and that new information could change any opinions, but I'm not absolutely sure if such a big changes are in the bond belt.
And let me repeat what was actually said in the statement. It was said that the bank board once again stated that the FX commitment level could be moved. That's the wording. So let's stick to the words that are actually in the statement.
This is, by the way, it seems to me almost the same as the previous, like the previous one. It's my perception.
Mr. Chairman from Česobet, please take the floor.
Yes, thank you. So let's back to the wording. I will repeat it and go back to my question. It stated that the board therefore again stated that the level of the exchange rate commitment could be moved, and it goes on that from this perspective domestic wage developments will be crucial in the period ahead. I skipped some part, but this is in your statement. So my first question is...
That was what I was quoting actually before.
Yeah, yes. I was here after the first intervention came, or the intervention came, and several times maybe last year, and you promised us 5% growth of nominal wages in the projection. Now we see that it's 1%, and it's ahead of the oil price shock. So in this perspective and reading this statement, is there any level for nominal wage growth for the bond member which you should consider as a threat, deflationary threat, and a result of global deflationary environment, and you should be forced then to act? That's the first question. And the second question is more technical, or rather partly technical and partly practical. We have seen what happened in Switzerland, and we have seen what's happening in Denmark. These central banks were forced to cut interest rates to the negative territory quite deeply. So my question is, the second one, whether the bank board considered now facing these actions of other central banks using the same regime, somehow the same non-standard measures, meaning specifically negative deposit rates. Thank you.
Okay, these were two questions for board members. Who will take the floor first? Mr. Řežálek, please.
Well, thanks for the question. To the first question, I don't feel any level for wages that is fixed for me for the longer time, and have it like a break for anything, because everything depends on the sentiment, and the sentiment is sometimes more important than the level. Secondly, Switzerland, Denmark, negative territory was the opinion of the bank board. I cannot present you bank board's opinion. I can present only my opinion, and I think that we are normally discussing about everything what is happening around Czech Republic, about every tools that are using, and I cannot exclude any discussion in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Rusnok would like anything to add?
Yeah, maybe it's my view. Yeah, I agree. There was no at all discuss any quantitative threshold for wage development, which would be the decisive factor for move in any direction. So the domestic wage development is mentioned amongst three factors which would be decisive in this perspective of the potential, theoretically potential exchange rate commitment change. So no threshold, rather the trends. I agree with Pavel. Of course, what I would have generally said, and that's something which I do not expect, if we will observe something like the drop of the wages, or I mean nominal or real mostly, it could be definitely considerable. But I do not expect that. It's more about the pace of growth in regarding the wages, in my opinion. The non-standard measures, yeah, it was not explicitly discussed, I would say, but definitely we never said that it's excluded or something like that for potential future.
Never say no.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions? Komerční.
Jiří Škop, Komerční banka. I have simple questions regarding the labor market. I would like to know what's the bank board view about the Naira, if we are close to non-inflation accelerating rate of unemployment, which if we are really close to it, or because I see the general unemployment rate is currently below 6% slightly. So what's the view of Czech National Bank about this? And if the wage growth in the future, in the coming quarters, can be lower also because the phenomenon called pent-up wage deflation. Pent-up wage deflation. It's the topic really discussed in the US, and it's something that because of rigidities in wages, the wages have been higher in the past, then it will be the equilibrium growth, and now when the unemployment is getting close to Naira or below it, even the wages will not grow just after some point where it will start to accelerate in the future.
If I may start, I must admit that we didn't discuss in board in so detail. So rather Tomáš or Petr will, I'm sure, give you much more valuable, sophisticated view on this matter. What I would say maybe is it's rather about the perception looking on the Czech labor market. So far, there was significant improvement in figures. I would say even partially, we are partially even, we haven't been so optimistic originally in our original forecast, so it's better than we expected. On the other hand, it seems to me that there is still certain room to achieve this Naira point or something like that, because still it seems to me that on the labor market, the companies are able to find more or less appropriate supply of the labor force. Of course, definitely it's very different regarding the different skills and regions. Yeah. But still, my perception is that we are not on this level you mentioned. But definitely my colleagues would be able to answer much more sophisticated way.
Tomáš, would you like anything to add?
Yeah, well, the last time that we did an explicit calculation of NAIRU was as part of the analysis of economic readiness for Euro, the publication which has been released in December, but to be honest, I don't remember the exact number. I assume it's somewhere around between 5, maybe 5.5%. But we didn't do any explicit analysis of this as part of the inflation report. But what we regularly have in the inflation report, it's the estimate of the output gap, which is another way to measure the slack in the economy. And those estimates suggest that currently there is still some negative output gap. The estimates range more or less from -1% to slightly above -2%. And well, the different methods expect that the negative output gap will be closed either by the end of this year or in the middle of 2016. So there is still some slack, and but it's much less than what we observed in the first half of 2013, and we expect the output gap to close on the forecast horizon. And I think the comparison of the observed unemployment rate and the estimated NAIRU, whatever it is, it's broadly in line with this picture. As regards the reasons behind the wage growth, we didn't have an explicit discussion of this mechanism that you mentioned, but in the inflation report we'll have a box on the nominal wage growth developments, which deals with structural issues. When the economy was falling into recession in 2009, we actually saw that the reported average wage growth figures were biased in the upward direction because the companies were laying off workers at the lower end of the wage distribution. And now one of the hypotheses that we were discussing is that in the upswing phase, the reverse may happen, as the newly hired employees have lower wage levels than the average. They may be biasing the average nominal wage growth figures in the downward direction. Which may not necessarily imply weaker inflationary pressures from the wage developments, because this is more a kind of statistical thing. The fundamental wage dynamics which are relevant for inflation could be somewhat higher than the reported figures. At the same time, my impression is that as regards the wage bill, the overall volume of wages which are paid in the economy, the developments are pretty much in line with the expectations, but the composition is somewhat different. We are being positively surprised by employment growth, while the wage growth surprises us on the downside. So the overall wage bill is the same, but the composition is different. I think from the general economic point of view, this is actually a more favorable distribution in terms of well, equity, equality and welfare in the economy, but of course from the inflationary pressures point of view, this would mean weaker inflationary pressures. So these are the kind of dilemmas that we are now discussing.
All right, thank you, Tomáš. Here was another question, and okay, the follow-up.
My name is Zdeněk Čech from European Commission. A very similar question on the labor market, but I can slightly modify. I can follow up on actually on the last statement by Tomáš on the wage growth. You know, it's very interesting. I just would like to, I mean, refer to Tomáš's presentations on nominal wage growth, you know, and the impact of oil prices, you know. Was a very interesting chart that you show kind of positive impact on the nominal wage growth, and you mentioned the role of trade unions. So I mean, my policy-related question would be that how do board members see, I mean, kind of wage outlook going forward? Also, given this kind of new split between the wage growth and employment. Especially in this challenging low inflation environment, you know. So this is a policy question. My second more technical question is on the perhaps this is to Tomáš, on the lower public investment in 2016 that you refer to the due to the EU cycle on structural funds. Whether you could elaborate a bit more on this, what could be the size of that impact, you know, more in terms of figures. Thank you very much.
Okay, who will take the policy question, Mr. Rusnok?
I will try. I will try. It's very difficult, and we have been already experienced in previous forecasts that in such a kind of period after the long-term stagnation, including labor market and wages, it's quite difficult to forecast precisely in quarters the development of wages. So what I will say is definitely only my personal perception that we can't expect some kind of really quick recovery in increase of wages on one hand, because it seems to me that there is a quite still firmly encouraged on the labor market the perception that that company should be appropriately cautious and modest in this respect. On the other hand, I wouldn't be too much pessimistic because if we will be right in regarding the general economy performance in the next 2 years, I mean 15-16, which is relatively positive regarding GDP terms and other performance indicator, it seems to me that later or earlier it will be visible also in the wages. And also I feel, I guess that the relatively generous approach of government to their employees will be the factor also later on for the private sector to go a bit farther in increase of the wages. So it seems to me still that that our forecast is realistic, and I can even imagine that that the reality will be slightly above that. But I absolutely admit that it's very difficult to forecast the timing and the details in the next few quarters. But generally, I would be a bit positive.
And Tomáš will take the technical question, I guess.
Well, actually, it requires even more knowledge than I have, and Petr Král is heading a division which has fiscal analysis as part of it, so I'll pass it to Petr.
The effort of the government to draw down as much money from the current or from the previous EU programming period as possible will lead to the fact that the gross fixed capital formation in general government sector will grow by almost 30% this year, and the EU funds, including co-financing from the domestic sources, will grow by approximately 47% in this year, whereas in the following year, in 2016, when we will be approaching the new programming period, the EU component will decline by almost 30%, which will lead to the overall decline in gross fixed capital formation in general government sector by more than 10%. That is the illustration of the fact that our current or our new forecast expects strongly positive fiscal impulse of 0.5% for this year, whereas for the next year we expect minus 0.3 percentage point contribution of this fiscal developments.
Yeah, thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will have time for 3 last questions. There was one here, another there, and maybe if there is one more, we can leave. We can take one more at the very end. Please take a.
Can I have two questions? Marek Dřímal, Komerční banka. Good afternoon. The bank board statement reads that one of the most decisive factors for the possibility of moving the floor is the market developments of the koruna exchange rate. That's all. That's what it reads. Can you please elaborate on this? If you would be happy with the depreciation of the crown or the stability of the crown at the current level? My second question, if I may, is regards the monetary policy horizon, which is 4 to 6 quarters in terms of interest rates. But you have a monetary policy tool, which is currently the exchange rate, where the translation into the economy is much faster, let's say 3 months or 1 to 2 quarters. Have you discussed the possibility of adjusting the monetary policy horizon in terms of your decision-making or inflationary forecast? Thank you.
I will start. Regarding the exchange rate, I would say we are okay with the stability of the exchange rate. Of course, we are ready to follow the development, and we know that there is certain natural uncertainty in the development generally on the market. So we've been definitely also discussed that we would expect some volatility on the market. That's something which I would say naturally happened before, and in certain way could happen also now. But generally, I would say the stability is okay. The next question was the horizon. We didn't discuss the change or any questions regarding the horizon of monetary policy.
Thank you. Mr. Řežáb would like to add something?
Shortly, like you. We have 2 tools. I'm sorry, not only one. The first one is interest rate, and the second exchange rate, and the second is quite common to use it in all the world at a time. It doesn't matter which tool you use, and the most important is not the exchange rate, but our main goal, that is inflation targeting. And I'd like to focus you at first about inflation, and secondly exchange rate, because this exchange rate is only tool to fulfill our main target.
Thank you. Helena had a question.
Yeah. Helena Horska from Raiffeisen. Maybe I will repeat the question, but I will try to do more specifically. Because the Czech Nation Bank was used to comment the extraordinary jump in exchange rate in a past development, jump up and jump down. And my question is, if there is still the same approach to keep the currency development in line with economic fundamentals, or you see the asymmetry, because you might maybe accept it jump to weaker level easily than the jump to stronger levels, fought not through the 27 level. So my question is, if you will comment if there would be jump through the 28 level and will try to stabilize the exchange rate development, or you will leave free. And the second question is, how different you expect your approach to the exit from current FX control compared to very criticized Switzerland approach? Thank you.
Okay, I guess Mr. Rusnok will take the opportunity first.
Yes. We already many times, it seems to me, stated that in current regime we fixed the floor. So the floor is clear, and we will definitely not allow to go under the floor. Regarding the upward movement, we always said it's the market question. In this respect, we are basically, I would say, we do not consider at all the upward movement of Corona, and this is still valid. This will stay and is still valid. And so, to be very specific to your specific question, the jump above is don't panic, and of course the jump down we will act, definitely. The second question was
about the exit and whether Switzerland was an example.
Yeah, Switzerland. Switzerland, yeah, it's definitely a very interesting lesson for everybody, it seems to me, and definitely also for us. It seems to me it helps because it's my perception. We definitely can erase one of the theoretical way how to exit this regime.
Mr. Řežávek?
Situations, the currency in Switzerland and the currency Czech Republic is really different, because Swiss franc is valued as a currency and Czech crown isn't. That's the first, the main important point. And I don't prefer to comment our colleagues in other central bank, but I'd like to mention that in more than 3.5 years, when Switzerland used the exchange rate as the tool, the franc appreciate to euro about 9%. That's not too much, and depreciate about depreciate about more than 15% to US dollar. I think it's necessary to remind it. And what about the Czech crown? If the Czech crown will openly, if the Czech crown will be weaker, it could help us to be earlier by our goal, and if not.
Tomáš, would you like anything to add?
Yeah, I would just like to add some comments on the Swiss case. Of course, people tend to compare us to this Swiss experience because there were many similarities as regards the existence of the floor, but I would also like to point to two major differences. In Switzerland, they never communicated anything about timing of the exit. While in our case, we say clearly that at the moment, the board says clearly that the exit is not going to take place before the second half of 2016. So in our case, the timing of the exit should be much, much less surprising than in the Swiss case. And the second difference is that even though Switzerland is often considered to be an inflation targeting country, officially it is not, while we are. And for us it's quite obvious what is the primary target, it's inflation, and we already discussed that what happens to inflation will be the decisive factor for the timing of the exit. So I think these two crucial differences need to be taken into account.
Ladies and gentlemen, I allowed 4 instead of 3 questions at the very end of our session, so let me now conclude our meeting. Thank you for your participation, and we'll be looking forward to meet you again in about 3 months. Thank you very much.